Okay, so in this video, I will talk about my equation, my formula, 6s plus 3e plus 0.50 plus 0.5b equals r, where r is resulting behavior, o is other factors, b is biological factors, e is environment, and s is stage of mind, or stage of soul, state of soul. And this equation works for most normal people. And anyone who you suspect has, problems that affect the quote-unquote normal person, or that you suspect has been misdiagnosed, this equation should work for them. And even if they have extreme biological factors, the environment and their inability to transcend will also affect the equation. But it's mostly for the average person, people such as myself and others who are being mistreated by psychiatry and mental health. So first I'm going to go over Merriam-Webster's definition of pet peeve. I'm going to touch on Psych Central, What is Trigger by U of L. Belter, Sexual Assault Center. Then I'm going to go to mentalhealth.net, November 2013 article. So pet peeve. A pet peeve is something that annoys or bothers a person very much. Full definition of pet peeve: a frequent subject of complaint. A frequent subject of complaint. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a thin line between a pet peeve and a trigger. But we're going to explore what the nuance really is. It's really these intricacies and these idiosyncrasies in life that we really must understand. It's vital, and it takes a certain analysis. So people say that, you're overanalyzing things. Well, to understand things, you need to analyze extensively. Triggers are very personal. Different things trigger different people. This is from the Psych Central. Okay, so they go on to talk about a person's triggers are activated through one or more of the five senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. It goes on to talk about all kinds of triggers, the smells of alcohol, things that remind you of the traumatic abuse, and anything that might have been in the place or situation prior to, during, or after the abuse, or reminds him or her of the abuse. Sirens, foghorns, music, crickets, chirping, car door closing. These are all part of psychological operations. They are abusing you, and then they're trying to trigger that abuse to make you seem crazy. And so we hear about noise campaigns. We hear about music being played. We hear them studying the victim and trying to remind them of the abuse. And that's also why they'll use the same color cars. They're trying to trigger that annoyance from the abuse of being stalked and harassed. And some people have been sexually abused, psychologically abused, physically abused, such as the case with the domestic violence victims. Even cursing and specific word use, it explores as well. And I'm going to do for you, I'm going to take a picture of these and I'm going to put it at the end so I don't have to show you while I'm doing this. So let's jump to mentalhealth.net. So, again, the triggers are going to be at the end from Psych Central and mentalhealth.net. So I've highlighted some examples of common triggers are the anniversary dates of losses or trauma. Remember, I've been sent to the psych ward 2 times on Cheek Day. So this is, they're not talking about mental illnesses here, they're talking about normal people who have experienced severe trauma or abuse, such as the loss of a loved one. Okay, so the anniversary dates of losses. Remember, this is some examples of common, socially normative, even common triggers. The anniversary dates of losses or trauma. Frightening news events. Too much to do, feeling overwhelmed. Family friction. The end of a relationship. Spending too much time alone. Remember, isolation is part of the psychological warfare tactics. Being judged, criticized, teased, or put down, being trolled and criticized is part of the psychological harassment. And several people in my interviews, probably as many as 1/4 of my interviews at this point, have reported that they have also seen them trolling me and that they don't respect them for doing it. And they wonder why they don't accept my top martial arts challenge, and they resort to trolling. Because these people aren't warriors. They're a bunch of psychological operation running cowards. So financial problems, getting a big bail, again, economic, financial sabotage, economic and financial sabotage are part of this as well. Physical illness, sexual harassment, being yelled at, and we see that as well. Certain smells, tastes, or noises. We see that as well, where they're gassing me and they're fuming me, and, that's definitely part of it as well. So then it talks about trigger action plan. All right, so what they're doing is, very basic psychology. Very basic psychology being applied in the scenario or, in the instance of psychological warfare. Because all psychology really is basic common sense stuff and a bunch of theories that no one can agree on. The feminist perspective of psychology. Humanist psychology, the secular humanists who are ultimately behind this. Psychological warfare, as opposed to violent repression, is a secular humanist approach to maintaining the internal organization. And so, they're trying to come up with strategies that are compatible with atheism, Satanism, secular humanism, feminism, and LGBT-friendly philosophies, which Islam, Christianity, and Judaism aren't, because they condemn the homosexual sinner. They're headed for perdition, eternal damnation. They are almost certainly not repenting with contrition, so they are not absolved of their sins. So again, what you see here is Israel's foreign aid, right? Compare that to Big Pharma. Well, Israeli sympathizers, AIPAC and what have you, gives money to politicians, millions of dollars. But every year, America gives $2 billion, or so it's been reported, in foreign aid to Israel. So they're getting a lot of bang for their buck, a lot of return for their buck. The same thing with Big Pharma. They're investing a lot of money in these psych ops and paying off politicians. But that same order that rewards Israel for giving money under the table to campaigns is the same system that rewards the lobbyists and special interest groups working on behalf of the pharmaceutical sector and the mental health oligarchs in this fake technocracy, which is really a nepotistic state of mainstream denial and Satanism. So they wish to maintain the order, suppress talented individuals, suppress dissidents, enforce social norms, and practice favoritism, reward the secret society members and their network with the nice jobs and the nice positions and the reverent power and what have you. Also, they are pushing the enterprise of psychiatry. And, they're making money through their victims. The shrinks, of course, are making money. The psychologists, the therapists, the laboratory hospitals, the pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals and the staff, the ambulance companies and their staff. Universities get to brag about how many jobs are available in the mental health sector as a result of this despicable, abhorrent, repulsive process. And so what you see here is a perpetual, never-ending, self-feeding trigger. Okay, so they start the process of this self-feeding trigger and they guide it along the way. Okay, so the trigger is part of the abuse. It's like it's a trigger that knocks over like a bunch of dominoes, the domino effect. It triggers the next domino, which triggers the next domino, and each trigger, exacerbates and compounds the trauma, the abuse. So each trigger in itself is not only triggering something else, but it's also worsening the abuse. And it goes like this. I'll give you an example. I'll talk about maybe, 100 million deaths a year, preventable deaths, which is about 4 preventable deaths a second. Okay? That will make me mad and sad because it offends my better sensibilities and my sense of honor. So I'll feel the need to expose them and stop them. And when I'm trying hard and not winning, that will lead me to being mad and trying harder, which will lead me to intense anger, and which will lead them to drugs and a psyop. At some point that will lead to that, and it will almost certainly occur by the time I'm intensely angry about it, because then they see I'm very dedicated and there's no buying me off, there's no coercing me, and this ultimately will lead to my death because I will not back down for a good reason. And when you look at what's going on, the women who are righteous are not going to be rewarded by this system. It's going to be a bunch of feminists who pretend that they're with the people because they believe that if you eliminate God and you promote quote-unquote human potential and merit, that the resulting environment will be one in which a bunch of atheistic feminists who do well in school, because women do better than men in school on average, will be in charge. So once you remove spirituality and you inject society with moral relativism, then you have a bunch of shallow, selfish, materialistic, conformist, cowardly, evil liars, and most of them will be women because women do better in school than men. But remember, book smarts and insight are not the same thing. Just because you're a nerd doesn't mean you have scruples, ethics, morals, and values. So this environment will be conducive to Satanists who value secularism and quote-unquote perceived intellect. It's really perceived intellect, but quote-unquote intellect over superstition. So it'll give the Satanists, the atheists, the secular humanists, and all other godless heathen philosophies the upper hand. Just look up Buddhist psychology, feminist psychology, and humanist psychology. And then, of course, they will have these fake brain scans and pretend that neuropsychology and neuropsychiatry and cognitive psychology and functional psychology are magically being applied tactfully and masterfully, which is not going to be the case. We are headed for a world where a bunch of effeminate men and the gynocracy are working together to oppress the most righteous men. And they'll bring up people like Socrates, even though Socrates believed that the pursuit of virtue was greater than the pursuit of wealth. These people worship the mysteries of Orpheus, Dionysus, Demeter, Diana, Isis, Ishtar, Semiramis, and other detestable abominations. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to do the right thing and make sure that all your ideas that you share, especially if you're a victim of their psychops, are conducive to bringing in Christian morality and are not compatible with their godless heathen philosophies that I will also show you at the end. It is imperative, it behooves us to act in a way that reflects spiritual acuity and intellectual morality as we press on with faith and moral will and raise our women with propriety, overstanding, and the fear of God. Thank you.